Good evening. I would like to call our Town of Sidney regular council meeting for Monday, February 14th, 2022 to order at 6 p.m. Good evening to those watching the live webcast and to those who may be watching a recording of the meeting at a later date. I am Mayor McNeil Smith, and in the council chamber with me is Councillor Garnett, and our 5 council colleagues are joining us via Zoom. You can see them on your screen. Good evening, Councillor Duncan, Councillor Fallett, Councillor O'Keefe, Councillor O'Toole, and Councillor Wainwright. In the council chamber, we have 3 members of staff, our CAO, Mr. Humble, our corporate officer, Ms. Nelson, and our manager of communications, Ms. Judson. We will also have staff members participating via Zoom and introduced at that time. And I would like to print it at the top of this evening's agenda is an update to our COVID-19 procedures regarding public participation at council and committee of the whole meetings. The town continues to encourage the public to participate in our meetings electronically. The change effective this evening and going forward is that council chamber is now open to in-person public attendance. However, there is a limited capacity for seating in the chamber, and so please contact the administration department by phone or email to register to attend in person or to participate electronically. Prior to today, we've requested that council members participate in our meetings electronically. Today, we have updated that to also invite council members to attend meetings again in person in future. If I may add a personal comment, for 2 years, I've greatly missed the in-person interaction with all members of council, with staff, regular complement of staff attending in person, and especially having members of the public attend in person. And I really look forward to seeing council, staff, and the public in person again soon. I'll lastly mention that our pandemic protocols for our council meetings are reviewed regularly, and please watch the message at the top of future agendas for any changes. I'll next turn to territorial acknowledgement and want to respectfully acknowledge we're holding this evening's meeting in the territory of the Saanich Nations. And we express gratitude to the Saanich people for their stewardship of these lands and waters for millennia, and we are all grateful to be living on these in this territory with the Saanich people, and look forward to sharing in the stewardship of these lands and waters in the future, and to working on reconciliation between our local government and the Saanich Nation local governments. I'll turn to approval of the agenda, and there are just a couple of changes before seeking a motion. The first is we have the addition of 2 written submissions under 5A, the bylaw that we are considering this evening, and those were received after after the agenda was published on Thursday. And the second is just a note regarding 7A, the minutes of our regular council meeting of January 24th. Individuals may note that we actually appended the committee of the whole minutes at that point in the agenda, but that has since been updated, and council members have received the minutes of the regular council meeting. With that, I would look for a motion to approve as amended, please.
I'll move the agenda be approved as amended.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Garnett, seconded by Councillor O'Toole. All in favor? I see all members in favor. The motion carries. We'll next turn to public participation. We have nobody registered to speak in the regular public participation period, but we do have a public hearing and a speaker, and so I will turn to item 4C1 on the agenda, which is a scheduled public hearing. Public hearings are a statutory requirement under the Local Government Act for official community plan and zoning amendment applications. They are an opportunity for any person who believes that their interest is affected by the proposed bylaw amendments and to be heard. Council's role during a public hearing is to have an open mind and to listen to all public speakers. Councillors may ask questions through the chair for clarification when a speaker has finished their remarks, and council members will not and do not challenge points made by public speakers or debate with them. Council welcomes input from citizens, and we request that all comments are made respectfully. Once the public hearing is closed, council will deliberate and make its decision on the matter when it later arises under the bylaws section of our agenda. Written submissions are not read aloud during the public hearing. They are included in the agenda package or were circulated to council if received after the agenda was published. I will now ask the CAO, Mr. Humble, to please read the public hearing notice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is the notice of public hearing for bylaw number 2223, which I'll summarize as follows. The Council of the Town of Sidney will hold a public hearing on Monday, February 14th, 2022 at 6 p.m. to allow the public to make verbal or written representation to Council with respect to a proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 2015 to permit the use of a detached secondary dwelling at 10228 Almond Street. A staff report that provides more information on the proposal and zoning bylaw number 2015 was made available on the town's website at www.sydney.ca. Written comments could be submitted until 4 p.m. on Monday, February 14th, 2022 by email, mail, or Dropbox. All correspondence submitted forms part of the public record and may be published in a meeting agenda. Residents wishing to attend in person or to participate electronically could register up until 12 p.m. on Monday, February 14th. Copies of the proposed bylaw, as well as all background documentation, were made available for viewing from 8:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday to Friday from January 31st, 2022 to February 14th, 2022 at the Sidney Town Hall. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And thank you, Mr. Humble. I will now open the public hearing. I understand we have one speaker this evening. I would ask Ms. Patty Anthony to please come forward. And please state your name, address, and indicate whether you are in favor or opposed to the zoning bylaw amendments during your remarks. Certainly. Just want to press the button.
There we go. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for allowing us to be here today. My name is Patty Anthony, and I'm here with my husband, Neil McCarricker, and we reside at 10228 Almond Street in Sidney, BC. The house in question, the one with the proposed amendment changes, that is our home. We have a detached garage that we would like to make into a secondary suite, a garden suite. More importantly, it's carbon, I won't say carbon neutral. We're minimizing the amount of carbon footprint. We're making it wheelchair friendly, so that it's got a capacity for not just a young person, but potentially us when we're older living there. We're keeping it in line with their existing building. We went around to many, many neighbors, and they were all in favor. They saw the before pictures, and they know fully what the garage looks like now and what it will look like when it's finished. We hired Finlis & Bonnet to do the design work, and we think it's going to be a great improvement to the neighborhood, and everyone we've spoken to has been on board thinking it's a great decision for our neighborhood, increasing affordable housing in our community.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Anthony. We appreciate you coming before us in person in Council Chamber
Thank you.
this evening.
That was probably the shortest speech I've ever done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you again. And so I'll now close the public hearing, and Council will come back to this item under bylaws in our agenda. Next, I'd like to turn to presentations, and I'm pleased to welcome Staff Sergeant Wayne Conley, Detachment Commander with the Sidney North Saanich RCMP Detachment, who will be giving a presentation this evening on the quarterly and annual report. Good evening, Staff Sergeant Conley.
Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. Happy to be here tonight to provide some policing and crime highlights from 2021 and to share brief information on policing priorities for 2022. So under the topic of resources, my update on policing resources is to report that between July and December of 2021, 6 replacement officers transferred into the detachment. So that is good news for 2021. There is currently 2 vacant positions, one of which I just learned today. As we turn the corner into 2022, we have notifications of transfers, paternity leave, and leave without pay applications, which will create new vacancies in the year ahead. Replacement officers are not provided for members that are off duty for medical, maternity, or paternity, or leave without pay for absences that are under 1 year. Efforts are underway to identify replacement officers for the transferring in of new members. From my assessment, Sidney will have been staffed at a level of 13 officers for 2021. This is 2 officers below the contracted strength of 15 officers, which Sidney has requested. For policing priorities in 2022, each year the detachment engages in consultation process with mayors, chief administration officers, community leadership, and partners to discuss public safety, crime impacts, and policing priorities. That process is currently underway. The invitation is extended to council members to provide input on policing services. They can do that by reaching out to me. Part of the process also includes a review of crime trends and statistics and consultation with the detachment's crime analyst. As a result of information gathered to this point, traffic safety and enforcement, fraud scam awareness and prevention, policing presence, visibility, and engagement in public spaces, and property crime reduction have been recommended as policing priorities to be considered for the community. As a little bit of a review of crime and traffic report for 2021, since the onset of COVID, we have seen some interesting changes to crime patterns and trends. For Sidney, property crime levels in specific categories of break and enters, theft from vehicles, and shoplifting have decreased by a margin of 20% or more. In contrast, we have seen as trending up fraud crime, and most notably fraud scam victimization has risen 48%. In 2021, the number of local victims of a fraud scam increased from 33 to 49. The amount of financial loss associated rose from $334,000 in 2020 to $664,000 in 2021. I should point out that that is reported losses that have been brought to the attention of police, and we know that there are many that have not been reported. Many seniors in our community have been impacted by an ever-changing scourge of online and phone-initiated scams. Most recently, a couple in their 90s were victims of 2 successive scams and lost large sums of their savings. With respect to crimes against persons, we saw similar levels to 2020. One area of increase was in the sex offense category, where the number of possession and distribution of child pornography investigations was much higher in 2021 in comparison to previous years. We saw a decline of 23% in motor vehicle accidents last year. There were no fatalities within Sidney. Impaired driving enforcement was up with 35 impaired drivers apprehended, which was a 13% increase over the previous year. In terms of community policing and crime prevention, in March, in conjunction with National Fraud Prevention Month and in partnership with Sidney and North Saanich, local media and other community partners, we plan to launch a local fraud awareness campaign. The efforts will be to raise awareness of this issue and steps for residents to take to prevent from becoming a fraud scam victim. Please watch for this messaging over the next month. I wanted to just make some comments about mental health calls. Before I do that, I think everybody is well aware of the connections that the detachment make for the Block Watch program, which we continue to expand, and we continue to send regular information out to, I think, between Sidney and North Saanich, over 1,000 residents that are signed up for the program. So mental health calls to police rose in 2021. That may not be a surprise to those that are listening. These are challenging calls at times for police responders, as they require risk assessments and crisis management, along with adequate resources to manage public safety. Recent calls have involved persons experiencing a mental health crisis, and they were possessing weapons. Officers attended 379 calls in 2021, resulting in 138 mental health apprehensions. Further challenges for policing on these calls are the prolonged wait times at Royal Jubilee Hospital, where in 2021, police spent 227 hours in wait time for apprehended persons to be admitted at the hospital. Sort of an indication of some of the strains and stresses in the medical system. That concludes my year-end policing report for 2021. If there are any questions about what I've shared, or in the quarterly and year-end policing report that I believe was distributed a couple of weeks ago, then I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I'll turn first to Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Staff Sergeant Conley, for your report. Appreciate it. Just a question and I guess a bit of a comment. I'm curious, on page 3 in the quarterly report around traffic in Sidney, North Saanich, and looking at the repeated collisions, the 4 locations. Thrifty's, yeah, that's understandable. McTavish traffic circle, we expect those to be on there. Just wondering about the other 2, the 2300 block of Beacon and 3rd and Beacon. Is that to do more with people darting across the intersections, or what do you think is the cause for those areas to have more collisions?
So are you referring to the map?
Just in the phrasing above that map, but yeah, it's the map in conjunction with the
okay,
with above.
So help me with that. So
there are 4 locations that have repeated collisions, and then and just wondering about the 2300 block of Beacon and 3rd and Beacon. Are listed as 2 of the 4 there?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't see that. There was where it says there was a 23% decrease in collisions?
On page 3.
Oh, I'm on the wrong page. Sorry.
The quarterly report. I beg your pardon, Mr. Mayor. It's the quarterly report. I think Councillor Garnett's
Quarterly
referring
report, yeah.
Thank
as
you.
opposed to the year end.
Oh,
Yeah,
I appreciate
sorry,
that.
I
I'm
should have
looking at the
specified
year-end
that,
as well.
Yeah, sorry. Should have specified quarterly report.
Okay, thanks, Councillor.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah, I don't really know the specifics of those locations and what may be attributing to those accidents. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine. And then with regards to the waiting time at the hospitals, I've heard other municipalities are calling for the provincial government to allow the release into the PSO's custody when they get to the hospital, just so that they can free up police resources on the street. Is that something you think would be something it would be?
Well, as I understand it, it's a complicated, long-standing issue that had to do with the hospital security and their status, they lost their peace officer status, which requires the police to remain until that person is actually admitted. They cannot take possession of that person that's brought in for security reasons, so it remains a police responsibility. And I know there's been lots and lots of discussion at higher levels, and it remains an unresolved issue at this point.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to any colleagues if they have any questions or comments. I'll turn to Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. Regarding the mental health calls, are these residents of Sidney, people who normally reside here, or is this once again, that we're having more people starting to pass through or new people to our community?
No, I think the majority of that, so those statistics were for Sidney and North Saanich. That was a combined report. Those numbers are fairly significant, but they are typically residents within our community that are experiencing, a crisis that results in intervention, and in a couple of cases recently, we've had, they're fairly significant issues to de-escalate. So concerning for sure, but it's typical of what other communities are experiencing as well. And so I don't think Sidney is experiencing anything that is different from what other communities are also seeing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no other speakers, I have one question and then a comment, and a thank you. And that is with regards to the increase in fraudulent scams. You indicated that we're pleased to hear that there will be a public awareness campaign. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you had just a moment to maybe highlight some of the basic or fundamental things that you would suggest to residents or citizens to be aware of, with fraudulent scams.
Yes, well, thank you, Mayor. I don't think there's anything more important that I can say is than to actually for people that are being reached out to online or with phone scams to actually speak with someone before because a lot of these scams are, there's urgency attached to them. There's all sorts of deception that's happening, and there's such a variety of scams that are happening. There's so many different types, but really the thing is, if we would like the public to reach out to someone, to a family member, to a banking institution, to the police, and just talk to someone about what they're experiencing. We've had both positive and of course all the other unfortunate things that have happened, but we have had situations where people have come to us and talked about being contacted and a situation they've been presented with, and then from there we were able to guide them and look into the situation and determine that they actually took the right steps to prevent becoming a victim. So that's one of the most important things. I think the other thing would be, that to be careful about what you place on social media. Lots of information can be extracted from what's placed on social media, which then provides another tool for those that are involved in this kind of activity, right, to capitalize on. And for families to reach out to their, to their elderly parents or family members and to provide good support for them, because they're trusting and they're being contacted, and they're feeling alarmed or whatever, and panic a little bit about something, and that's very much what happened with this couple the past week. It was disheartening to understand that they thought they were helping out a family member, and they saw urgency in the situation. They went to the bank, they wired this money, and the whole thing was a complete scam. It was really, really disheartening to see.
Thank you for those comments. I think they're all helpful, and we look forward to the campaign, the awareness campaign. Just in summary, thank you very much for the quarterly and the annual report. We appreciate how in depth and well laid out the information is to council. And thank you for highlighting at the beginning of your presentation the policing priorities, for our community this year. It results from engagement, and that's helpful going forward. I think we're pleased to see, the several areas of reduction in criminal code, certain criminal code offenses, and some of the traffic offenses, but disheartening, as you've indicated, to see both the rise in the fraudulent claims and and quite frankly, not just the rise, but quite frankly, what the magnitude is today of those fraudulent claims, and also the magnitude of the health responses. And you know, the pandemic is a health crisis, a mental health crisis, as well as the physical crisis. And we certainly appreciate you know, the ongoing professional service the detachment provides to our community, and appreciate the additional challenges you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Yeah, I as I think about what's happening in our communities with the fraud scam, like the word epidemic almost comes to mind. We've just seen it trending up to such a significant level, and we're hearing weekly about how people have been victimized by it. So that's the key messaging, that we just need to keep working on it and raise that profile. So I thank you for your focus on that, Mayor.
Thanks, Staff Sergeant
Thank
Conley.
you.
I would look for a motion that the quarterly policing reports for 2021 be received.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? I'll call a question. All in favor? I see all members are in favor. The motion carries. Thank you. And so now we'll turn to Section 5, bylaws, and we do have bylaw number 2223, zoning amendment number 41 at 10228 Almond Street, to add a detached secondary dwelling as permitted and conditional use in the R2 zone. We have had the public hearing, and as speaker this evening, we did receive one written submission that was included in the agenda, and as indicated during agenda review, we've received two subsequent written submissions, which Council has had an opportunity to review. And so if we choose to move forward this evening, we could have a motion to give third reading. We could then have discussion, and then we could consider a motion to adopt and decide whether to approve or not. So I would seek the pleasure of Council.
I'll move third reading.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Rintoul, seconded by Councillor Garnett. Discussion, Councillor Rintoul?
No, nothing. Thank you.
Turn to Councillor Garnett. Okay, any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? I see all members in favor. The motion carries. Thank you.
I'll move adoption.
Second.
All in favor? I see all members in favor. The motion carries. Thank you. Under Section 6, we have no development permits or development variance permits. And I'll turn to adoption of minutes, and we have those from the regular council meeting of January 24th.
Move adoption.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Garnett, seconded by Councillor O'Keefe. Any errors, omissions, or comments? Call a question. All in favor? I see all members in favor. The motion carries. We have no business not completed at a previous meeting or a rise and report from in camera. I will turn to council reports, and I'll turn to Councillor Garnett, who has two verbal reports as our council liaison to the Sidney Museum and Archives and to the Shaw Centre for the Salish Sea. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. These are be brief. Just wanted to update you on the museum first. Sidney Museum and Archive Society. We had the last board meeting on Saturday, February 12th. An update for they'll be sticking with the status quo with regards to their COVID protocols. And as far as the financial aspect of the museum, we didn't have the financials at the January meeting because the meeting was a little quicker than anticipated. So they ended the 2021 year with total donations of just over 21,600, and their goal was 25,000. So, and they did have the 3-month closure for the floor refurbishment. So that's a really good accomplishment given that they were closed for 3 months. January 2022 has started really well. They're averaging $3.91 per donation, which is 25% above budget and also 25% above last year at this time. In the month of January, 1,242 people came through the door, which was greater than last year. And that all those things combined in combination with the grant writing, they ended that net income for the month of just over $28,500, and they had budgeted for a loss of just over $2,100. So this is a great start to the year so far. And they have also submitted 3 new grants, and another one is currently being written. So, and I think they're pretty positive that they'll be getting some of these, and they've been very successful in the past, so I have no reason to doubt that they won't have some more success there. As many in the community are aware, the Lego exhibit is currently underway and will run till March 31st. So far, there's been a very positive response to the exhibit, and also to the layout changes from last year that were put in place. People are finding it's a really great flow to the building. Another positive, the Sidney Museum was featured in Seaside Magazine, and the Education and Outreach Coordinator was interviewed on CFAX's radio's Mornings with Al Farabee in January to discuss the museum and the Lego Brick exhibition. So this is another great opportunity to advertise the museum and have this out just beyond our community, but all through the area. With regards to Family Day, the museum will be hosting a virtual trivia night this Friday, February 18th, and there are prizes attached to that. And they once again will be hosting their Downtown Sidney Family Day scavenger hunt. There are 28 businesses participating, and it runs from February 18th to March 7th. And good news on another front of grant writing, and I call them grant warriors now because they're so successful. The education coordinator was successful in achieving her first grant of $1,000 from the BC Museums Association to help cover the costs of the scavenger hunt. So, you know, these guys are doing a fabulous job. And finally, as part of BC Heritage's Heritage Week, which runs from February 21st to the 27th, the education coordinator will be taking part in an online speaker event with the Saanich Pioneer Society and the Vancouver Island Regional Library Sidney North Saanich branch. The event is called Meet Your Museums and will be taking place on Friday, February 25th at 3:30 p.m. via Zoom. Members of the community will be able to hear about local history work that's happening in the area and ask any questions they may have. That's the end of the one for the museums, Mr. Mayor, and we'll move on to the Shaw Center for the Salish Sea. And the last board meeting was January 25th. The museum or the Shaw Center was closed for a week in January for routine maintenance, which is an important part of keeping things on in the facility that the way they want them to keep running to maintain and not have things catch them by surprise. Financially speaking, as many know, their calendar runs from June 1st to May 31st. And from June 1st to December 31st, their expenses were $50,000 or 7% below plan, and revenue was $62,000 or 10% better than plan. Inside of that, earned revenue was $133,000 or 36% better than plan, and admissions revenue was $107,000 or 36% better than plan. All of which has resulted in a net position of plus $63,000 compared to the plan of minus $48,000. So this is good news. And overall, as of January 20th, 82% or $376,000 of the operating plan budget of $461,000 for the year has been secured. So they have approximately 4 months to get the next $85,000. So that's looking pretty positive. And in terms of something that's sort of an add-on to the pandemic and all the stresses and mental health issues that have come upon us throughout it, the center is being a bit bold and forward, and they're looking into adding an EAP, which is an employee assistance program, and many people are aware of that, but many people may not be, and that provides help and assistance for people, especially in the mental health area, and contacts professionals for people if they need that assistance. So this is a good thing to follow, and I'm glad to see they're doing that. They're also taking advantage of the fact that a board member has an extensive background in security and will be helping the center to conduct an annual security review, which is another important aspect of looking forward and into the future. Exciting news, they have a new octopus ambassador, and they're seeking help in naming it with an in-house vote. There's 4 choices, and I'm not going to mention them so that people can go to see, but they're all taken from local First Nations names. So please feel free to go down there, check out the new octopus, and help name this octopus. And finally, for those who are unaware, the Shaw Center will be adopting a proof of vaccine requirement as of tomorrow, February 15th, for all visitors 12 and older. With everything changing daily, I'm not sure if this is going to be a long-term thing, but it's something that the staff members and volunteers were really wanting, so that's something they're moving forward with. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any comments or questions of Councillor Garnett's reports. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Garnett. Just a question going back to the museum on that February 25th Zoom meeting. If people want to participate in that, is there information on how to do so on the the museum's website?
I believe that's correct.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor O'Keefe. Other comments or questions? I'd look for motion to that the verbal reports on the museum and the Shaw Centre for the Salish Sea be received.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Rintoul. You can second, Councillor Garnett.
Second.
I'll call the question. All in favor? All members in favor, thank you. And I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe, our liaison to the South Island Prosperity Project, and her update, which also included a written report. Councillor O'Keefe.
Yep, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, you have my written report in front of you, just a couple things that I'll highlight. Wanted to make mention of the 3 awards that SIP received from the International Economic Development Council. So that IEDC, in case you don't know who they are, they're the largest membership organization for economic development in the world with 5,000 members. So for SIP to be recognized by that organization for 3 awards is quite an accomplishment. Some of the things that they got recognized for came out of the Rising Economy Task Force. The Micro Start campaign is a non-degree certification program that helps people get particular competence in a particular skill or group of skills, and that proved to be very successful during the pandemic. And SIP is now going to be working on additional credentials through Camosun College. Indigenous Prosperity Center, that was another recommendation that came out of the Rising Economy Task Force, and they're moving forward with a number of initiatives there. And the one thing that I don't know it's covered in the written report, but the community profiles, they're still working on that. As you may recall, Sidney is one of the pilot communities involved in that, and they expect to have our draft profile within the next month or 2 to take a look at. So that's all I have, unless anybody has questions on any of that.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to colleagues if they have any questions. Look for a motion to receive the report on the South Island Prosperity Project.
So moved.
And
Sorry, Councillor O'Keefe, go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say to move for receipt and refer to the EAC for information.
Okay, so I'll take that as the mover and seconder. And Councillor Garnett seconds. All in favor? I see all members in favor. Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we'll turn to committee reports, and I'll turn back to Councillor O'Keefe, who is our liaison to the Emergency Planning Committee.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, 11C.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Wainwright. I'll now turn to Councillor Wainwright as under item 11C, who has a motion to bring forward. Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mayor. Apologies for bringing this forward without any supporting paperwork, but it seemed to be somewhat time sensitive, and this came out of the preparation for the agenda for tonight. I'm sure my colleagues have heard expectations that some of the COVID restrictions will be lifting probably for the summer. And on tonight's agenda, we see Peninsula Celebration Society wanting to get approval for some street closures and such for their normal summer events. I note, however, that we've made plans to have the Sidney Street Market at the Mary Winspear, and given that it's now mid-February, and it's reasonably likely that that the restrictions might lift and things could restart on Beacon. The motion, and I'd like to move that staff write to the operator of the Sidney Street Market, West Coast Impressions, requesting they consider restarting the summer markets on Beacon Avenue on Thursday night from 5:30 to 8:30 from June 2nd to September 1st this year.
Thank you. Councillor Wainwright moves. Seconded.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Rintoul. Thank you for bringing this forward. Councillor Wainwright, any further comments?
The only comment is that it doesn't lock the operator into doing it on Beacon. It's just it opens the possibility and requests them to have a look at whether it's feasible to do it on Beacon instead of Mary Winspear. Thank you.
Thank you for noting that, Councillor. I turn to Councillor O'Keefe, and then I have a comment.
Thanks. I'm in favor of this. The only question I had, and perhaps a question through to you, Mr. Mayor, to staff about the timing. My recollection is before this was going to Mary Winspear Center, there was some concern about the start time. So I can't remember if the proposed start time in this motion of 5:30 was in keeping with what the West Coast Impressions was wanting or not.
Mr. Humble.
Yeah, thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe. No, they're still, we haven't reported back to council regarding that. They're still requesting the 4:30 start as was previously requested.
Okay, that's fine. So I guess we would send this back to them, and then staff would come back to us later if we decide to go ahead with the Beacon Street market and propose any changes to the time at that time, I presume.
If I'll let Mr. Humble go ahead.
Yeah, the way I read the recommendation, or the motion rather, is that we write to the operator for them to consider restarting the summer market on Beacon Avenue. So fundamentally, we'll have to wait to hear from them before we ultimately report back. And whether or not they'll comment on the time, we'll have to wait and see.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Humble. And yeah, part of my remarks are that it is included in the motion, the request that it be from 5:30 to 8:30, which would be a 5 o'clock street closure, which is what it was prior to the pandemic. I appreciate the remarks from Councillor O'Keefe, but I think we're clear in this request, as Councillor Wainwright has indicated. This is a request, and I just want to acknowledge that as Council does recall that West Coast Impressions did come before Council in January with a request to alter our memorandum of understanding between the town and West Coast Impressions for 2022 to permit them to hold a market off Beacon Avenue, and we granted that request. That request came, as I indicated, in January, which as I recall seemed to be even before the peak of the current pandemic. Certainly things have been changing, and I think for the better, certainly most recently. We've since learned that, and I've learned through the Sidney Market website, that they have been planning and organizing the market on Sundays from May 8th to September 25th during the middle of the day, and that they are planning to run in the parking lot of the Mary Winspear Center, and that also they are planning to run Thursday night markets in the parking lot at the Mary Winspear Center from June 2nd to September 1st. Again, I think given other events are unfolding, coming back in the community, that the general public would certainly be very pleased after 2 years to see the market return to Beacon Avenue. We appreciate the work that West Coast Impressions has to do to organize the large markets on Beacon Avenue. There is approximately 3.5 months from now until the start of that time, and so again, we are making a request this evening. I turn to colleagues. Councillor Fallett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To that point, I just want to be really clear that the start time is something that we're going to expect to hear back from West Coast Impressions. Having spoken to them at length about the start time, looking at a half an hour for the street market to be assembled on Beacon Avenue is logistically just not possible. And So I'm just concerned that if we come out of the gate saying 5:30 to 8:30, and if West Coast Impressions is already making arrangements to potentially look at Mary Winspear for a Thursday night market, they may decide that it is easier for them to do so. And, you know, I don't know what's better for the community. I'm not going to judge that, but I'm a little concerned with the start times. I would prefer that we leave the start time out of this particular request and let it come from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think in the, out of a sense of urgency, and I will look to the pleasure of Council, but given that West Coast Impressions has come before Council in January, and that they have started to organize and they are advertising the markets to take place in the Mary Winspear parking lot on Thursday from 5:30 to 8:30, that Council deliberate at this time whether they're willing to consider. I think we heard the case in the previous request for the change of time, and I think there are views on both sides. And you know, I could see that you know, either just having a discussion on the current motion, or if there was a proposal for an amendment. I won't speak to it in. Well, I'll speak in favor of 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. Because the market was run successfully for most of the 20 years that the market has been in place. And that while for some vendors, yes, additional time may be helpful, the business community had concerns. The market ran for approximately its first 12 plus years from 5:30 to 8:30, and then the business association at that time was running the Thursday night markets. There was not a memorandum of understanding between the town and the operator, and that operator, or that the business association leadership at that time and the market operator chose to request an earlier start time of 4:30. That was granted. It ran for a couple of years at that time, and then subsequently it reverted back to a street closure time of 5 o'clock and the market starting at 5:30. So I'm in support of a 5:30 start. We did have some discussion, I believe, when it came forward requesting the earlier time, that we might seek the operator to seek input from the business community on a change of start time. And I can, you know, from previous discussions, not this year, but in previous years and discussions over the start time, it came down to businesses that are only open till 5 o'clock, being concerned that with the traffic that is normally circulating in the latter part of the afternoon, that they have a concern with that, with the earlier street closure, because the impacts, quite frankly, are not just from the time that the street closes, whether it's 4:30 or 5 o'clock. It happens previous to that with vehicles, market operators coming to town earlier and taking up parking spaces and that sort of thing. And I appreciate such you know, such market participants, you know, sometimes get out of their vehicle you know, before they are ready to set up and make purchases in stores and that sort of thing. I'm not saying it's all negative. What I'm just saying that is the business community did express concerns over those impacts, and that's a bit of the background. And I would, as I say, I will support this motion, but I'm open to other councillor comments. I see Councillor Fallett would like to speak for a second time. We'll turn to any first-time speakers and then come back to Councillor Fallett. Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. Mayor, I support the comments that you've made in regards to keeping the time to 5:30. I've heard similar comments from other business people, and so I think when we look at this, our primary concern has to be our businesses that are there already. So I sort of lean in favor of our existing businesses. One of the things I'm wondering is if the issue is that they don't have enough time to start up, could they not push the actual start time and the end time up half an hour? So if they're going to be starting their setup at 5 o'clock and they feel that need more time, can they then set a start time at 6? So then they have the full hour that they think they need. And if they think it's worthwhile, to tack a half hour onto the end. Is that something that might be feasible?
I think, Councillor O'Keefe, we could leave those as comments, for the, for the market operator to consider.
Sure, okay.
I don't know if you're looking for a, particular response, but.
I guess what I would just suggest to staff, if, as Councillor Fallett had mentioned, if the market operator comes back and says, this isn't going to work for us, the start time, we're going to stay at Mary Winspear. But if they know that perhaps council might consider extending the hours so that they would have their full hour of start time or setup time, and that they might be more amenable to coming back to Beacon. So I'll just leave it at that for staff's consideration when they're chatting with the operator. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to other first-time speakers. Seeing none, I'll turn to Mr. Humble. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just wanted to clarify and make it clear as well to council. So as per council's approval of the town entering into an MOU with the market operator with respect to allowing them to not operate the market on Beacon Avenue and instead operating at the Winspear Centre. So that MOU has been executed, so we have executed that. That's complete. And then the other thing that's worth maybe indicating as well is that they have, it's my understanding, they have an agreement with the Mary Winspear currently, so that's in play as well. But understanding that this is a request for them to reconsider both of those elements. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Humble. Councillor Fallett, please.
Thank you. So just to clarify from my perspective, the starting time, I have no issue with the starting time being at 5:30, and I appreciate all the reasons for that. My concern was the amount of starting time, the amount of setup time that they have. And a half hour logistically doesn't work. So I'm just going to, that's just from my conversation with West Coast. To Councillor O'Keefe's comments about bumping on a half hour later, I think one of the problems that's there is it gets dark, and that's, that sort of changes the environment. And also if weather pulls up, it's going to be worse by the time 8 o'clock hits. So they're probably not, not speaking for West Coast, but I'm suspecting that that's just not going to work. So hearing what Mr. Humble has just said, I would suspect that if they've got an MOU with Mary Winspear for Thursday night and they're given the option of coming to Beacon Avenue with half-hour start time, I wouldn't be surprised if they said thank you, but no thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fallett. I think Councillor should comment, may wish to comment that if we pass this motion as currently worded, whether we're willing to consider the market operator coming back to council. I mean, time is of the essence here. There is only 3.5 months left. It's going to be a couple of weeks before we have another council meeting. That only reduces the time frame. I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I think the operator has been involved in a good partnership with the town. Clearly, it's the town's market. This is our contractor, and if we as council feel that closing parking on our on our main retail and service street early is in the best interest of the town, then I think that discussion would resonate strongly right now while we're talking about this. And in my mind, I would be concerned with that element. I would be concerned with my own office is on Beacon. There are others, in the retail sector where you see people relying on those parking spots and basically shuttering their business an extra half an hour early because their shoppers, their supporters need to move their vehicles in advance for the market, I think would be problematic. So I would be concerned with, dwelling on this aspect of the discussion. I think what has been so popular about the street market in part is the ambiance. Part of being on Beacon in Sidney, and I think we've got a great track record of working cooperatively with the service provider West Coast Impressions, and we'll hope to continue doing that, and hopefully it makes sense to all parties to move forward, if permissible, under public health orders, to see it back on Beacon Street this summer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeking other further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? We have none opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we'll turn to section 12, committee reports, and I'll now turn to Councillor O'Keefe, our liaison to the Emergency Planning Committee.
Thank you, Mayor. You have the minutes for several meetings in front of you. Just a couple things I'll highlight is the staff continue.
Sorry, Councillor O'Keefe, if you want to make the motion first on the 3 minutes, on the 3 sets of minutes, and then you can certainly speak.
Okay, so I will move receipt of the minutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. So just a couple highlights that the staff continue to work with CRD and other Saanich Peninsula municipalities on emergency drinking water for emergency situations, and also that HRVA, in case you're wondering what that is in the minutes, it's the hazards, risks, and vulnerability assessment, and those are required, basically our community risk profile, which gets done every 3 years, and we will be updating our profile this year. That's all.
Thanks, Councillor O'Keefe. Other further discussion? Seeing Councillor Fallett and then Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Mayor. I wonder if I could ask a question through you to Chief Mickelson, actually. And I noticed in the last Peninsula warning system, what is Peninsula Alert, which I believe was a tsunami from Tonga, that the alert went out. And I noticed on social media that there were some concerns from different people that they were getting their alerts at different times. Some came very early in the morning, some didn't get theirs until 8 o'clock in the morning. That was timestamped, I gather, on their phones, as opposed to that they just happened to see it at 8 o'clock. Is there, do you understand what that was about, or is that something you're aware of, or?
Yes, through the mayor to Councillor Fallett, yes, I am aware. It seems that none of these mass alerting systems are perfect, but the Peninsula Alert, or the Connect Rocket platform that we utilize, allows our residents to choose a variety of methods to receive the alert, being text, email, phone, landline, cell phone, etc. And they all get pushed out at once, but I think the take-up time, depending on the different server sites or call center sites where these things are pushed out, they're all not going to arrive simultaneously. So I believe the lag that people are identifying is likely the result of the different selection of notification method that they've chosen. But I've yet to be part of a mass alert that hasn't had a few glitches or bugs. When you're talking about potentially tens of thousands of alerts over upwards of half a dozen technology platforms, we're going to have the odd glitch. So unfortunately, that's reality, but I'm happy that it did work. And I think that's most of the root cause of that issue.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the explanation and recognize the rationale for it. I just wanted an understanding of how that happened, so thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I'll turn to Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. So I'm just looking at this section on the emergency potable water, and it looks like there was quite a bit of discussion on that one, and all of the different options, and most of it about, you know, the CRD and our water source, and that our supply is only as good as the next weakest point that's somewhere up between here and Souk. And we had briefly started talking about the wells in our community, and then that had been kind of put off due to COVID. And I'm just wondering, was that investigated and found just not to be feasible, or are we falling back on just relying on the CRD again?
Well, and again, through the mayor to Councillor Duncan, they're excellent questions. And, you know, we have worked with a few consultants in respect to the viability of there's primarily 2 well sites. It remains an option, but we didn't get a lot of comfort that the significant amount of money that we would invest that it would withstand a seismic event. So we weren't, that I couldn't come back to council and say with a high degree of certainty that it would be a resilient piece of infrastructure for disaster water. So you are correct in that obviously we are constrained in respect to the water that does flow all the way from the Souk Reservoir out to the peninsula. But we do have the hardened hydrants, which are the blue hydrants that some of you may have noted. One at the roundabout at the airport. There's one close to the Wayne Road Fire Hall, and there's another one located just as you go up, I believe, Forest Park Road towards a Panorama. So those are the ones that we're aware of, and those are actually fed by the reservoir that's up on Dean Park. So that is really I can kind of look you in the eye and say that's a hardened set of pipes that basically will get to that blue hydrant that is rated for a seismic event. Now that's a positive step forward for us, but now we're tasked with working with engineering and looking at grant funding, and that's all part of our internal task list for this year. It's coming up with a plan to distribute water from that site to various places, obviously on the east side, but also on the west side, and how we do that. So that's kind of our next steps.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion or questions? Thank you, Chief. We have a motion on the floor. I'll call the question. All in favor? I see all members in favor. The motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Keefe. Next, I'll turn to Councillor Duncan, who was chair of our Committee of the Whole meeting on February 7th last week. And just note that in addition to moving the minutes, there are 10 recommendations. And perhaps for efficiency, as Councillor Duncan moves each recommendation, Councillor Garnett in the chamber might second them, and then we can certainly have any discussion and vote going forward. Councillor Duncan.
First, I'll move to receive the minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? I see all members in favor. Motion carries.
Okay, I'll start. Recommendation 1. Committee recommends, and I so move, that council that $9,000 for hydrant upgrades be funded from reserves.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? None opposed, motion carries.
That the water operating and capital budgets for 2022 be approved as amended.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? None opposed, motion carries.
That the sewer and operating and capital budgets for 2022 be approved as presented.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? I see all in favor. Approved, or motion carries.
Recommendation 3. That $4,500 to the Vancouver Island South Film and Media Commission for 2022 be removed.
Sorry, I'm not following the recommendations.
I'm sorry, R3. Sorry, there is a. Oh, did I skip? No.
So you made recommendation.
Sorry, I'm just reading the next one, which is the opposed. There's no motion there.
Yeah.
Citizen satisfaction.
Thank you. $30,000 for the citizen satisfaction survey for 2022 be deferred to 2023.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? None opposed, motion carries.
That the staff report dated January 25th, 2022, regarding a new exempt position of Manager of Human Resources be referred to the February 22nd, 22 budget deliberations meeting.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? I see all all in favor, motion carries.
Recommendation 6, that the Rest Haven Park off-leash dog park with the smaller footprint design of option B be referred back to staff for a redesign of the interior pathway and the north boundary of the park.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? I see all in favor, motion carries.
Okay. Recommendation 7, now there's an original wording here, I'll read that out, but then I'll suggest an amendment or an alternative wording. So the current motion says that the staff report dated February 7th, 2022 regarding the Rest Haven off-leash dog park be referred to the February 22nd, 2022 budget deliberations meeting, which would open us up to the debate again. So I'm suggesting that the alternate wording be that staff report be referred to a future meeting where we receive the staff report from motion 6 with the redesign.
Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Second? Discussion? Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mayor. We weren't expecting that staff were going to have the redesign completed by our budget meeting on the 22nd. And a key issue for the budget meeting is, do we include a budget for the off-leash dog park or not? So I think we do need to refer it to the budget meeting and not wait until the redesign is completed.
Councillor Keefe?
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Wainwright. I also recall one of the reasons we wanted to talk about it again is we anticipated we might get some additional feedback from the public on that. So I'm in favor of just going with what we have for recommendation 7. Thank you.
Okay, if I may, thank you, Councillor. If I may turn to Mr. Humble, or staff, for a moment, that given the motion under recommendation 5 or 6, that it be referred back to staff for a redesign, that that would come, and as Councillor Wainwright has indicated, that report will come back to council after budget deliberations, and that currently staff, if any correspondence is being received, if there's any current correspondence with regards to the dog park, that it's being referred to that process when that report comes back and not to budget deliberations.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, we've received quite a bit of correspondence on this. Some relates to design, some relates to a particular individual's position regarding even having a dog park at Rest Haven Park, etc. Some of the correspondence is made out to Mayor and Council, some of it's made out to staff. Some have likely already completed the survey, so there's a lot of duplication as well there. So staff, we're going to take all of that, hold off, and bring it forward as part of the reporting back on the redesign. That was the intent of staff.
Thank you. If I may make a comment partially in response to Councillor O'Keefe, is that yes, there is, I believe it's a $40,000 line item in the budget, but that the funding is from park DCCs, it is not from property tax, and that if we were to go through our budget deliberations and approve the budget on February 22nd, that would be a marker in the budget for that expenditure, and that then we would then be expecting the report from staff on the redesign and any correspondence from the public at a future meeting, and that if at that meeting we chose to not proceed with the park at all, that is not defer it to a future year, but not to proceed with it, that would be a budget amendment to withdraw the $40,000 funding. So otherwise, if this comes back, are we having a discussion about approving the park when we don't have the information that staff will be bringing forward. Hence, I support the amended recommendation. I'll turn to Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Likewise, I support the amendment in that I think that redesign is a part of the approval. I like the concept of having a placeholder in the budget, for this item. And as per the mayor's comment, then I feel like it gives us the opportunity to do a more fulsome consideration of the location being at Rest Haven, as well as the public input on this in the context of whatever redesign footprint staff bring forward. And I feel like that's probably a fairly cumbersome and time-consuming expectation to occur during our budget deliberations. So I'll support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. If I may, through you to staff, can we read that amendment back again, if that's would be all right?
So the intent, so the motion is that the staff report, that I'm not sure if it's the report or not, but that it be referred to a future meeting where we receive motion number 6, which is basically the redesign. So it's basically referring this all back to the future when the meeting comes forward for the redesign. Sorry.
So, just so I can understand this, so if we went with the amendment, we would not be discussing this at budget, we would not be putting money aside for it?
Yeah, I don't know that.
So, if this motion was approved as is on the floor, then we would not be receiving a staff report. We know we're not going to receive the future staff report on the redesign until after budget deliberations.
Yeah.
We understood that from last meeting. And so if we refer this report, the report that we discussed at last week, if we refer that to the same meeting where we're going to receive the new report, then we will be going into budget deliberations. During our budget deliberations, it's within our purview to consider any item within the budget. And one of the items is the allocation of $40,000 to the dog park improvements, which, as I indicated earlier, is funded from park DCCs. If we were to remove that from the budget, we are in essence canceling the project. And do we want to do that before we receive the report, the future report from staff after budget deliberations?
Okay, thank you.
Yep. I'll turn back to Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Wouldn't it be easier to just say we're not going to accept recommendation 7, because the $40,000 is already in the budget, right? So the only thing we would have done with recommendation 7 was to rehash whether it should be there or not. So can we just, instead of amending recommendation 7, just cancel it altogether?
Thank you for that suggestion, Councillor O'Keefe. I will take it a step further, and we could choose to receive for information, because we did receive the report at the previous meeting, at the council, at the committee of the whole meeting. So we could amend the motion to receive for information, and it wouldn't change what we can do during our budget deliberations or what will occur at a meeting after budget deliberations in a future report from staff. So would you like to make that amendment?
So I'll make that amendment.
Actually,
would it be easier for me to just withdraw the motion on the table?
Yeah, that would be easier.
I'll withdraw the motion on the table. Councillor O'Keefe can, and you know what? I'll just move it.
Sorry, I just want to confirm the mover, and if you can just nod, the mover and seconder agree to withdraw the motion.
Agreed.
Thank you. Please go ahead, Councillor Duncan.
Move receipt of the report from our budget meeting on the Rest Haven off-leash dog park.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor? And none opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Please continue, Councillor Duncan.
All right, recommendation 8. that the staff report dated February 1st, 2022 regarding fire department staffing be referred to the February 22nd, 2022 budget deliberations meeting.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? I see all in favor. Motion carries.
Recommendation 9, that Mr. Hiswick's presentation and staff report dated February 1st, 2022, providing additional information respecting the 2022-2026 financial plan be received for information.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? I see all in favor. Motion carries.
That the 2022-2026 financial plan be amended to permit the purchase of a used ladder fire truck in 2022.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? I see all in favor. The motion carries. Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I'll now turn to staff reports. We'll turn to item 13A. The first is Peninsula Fire and Emergency Mutual Aid Agreement. We have a report from staff. I'll turn to staff for an introduction. Fire Chief Mickelson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Staff may recollect that approximately about this time last year, staff brought forward a request to renew our existing Peninsula Fire and Emergency Mutual Aid Agreement for 1 year, just to facilitate a refresh and modernization of the agreement. We made significant progress up until the time that the Central Saanich Fire Chief unexpectedly departed. And then basically we kind of slowed considerably. We have made some progress with the new fire chief in Central Saanich, but as a result of a whole raft of things, he just isn't 100% up to speed yet. And we feel we'd be better served by just renewing this agreement for another year to allow all three parties to have sufficient time to refresh the agreement.
Thank you. I'll turn to council if there are any questions. Seeing none, we have a recommendation.
I'll move the recommendation that the Peninsula Fire and Emergency Program Mutual Aid Agreement be renewed for up to 1 year to February 2023, or until a new agreement is brought forward for council's consideration.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Councillor Fallot?
Nope, good.
Councillor Rintoul? Any further discussion? I'll call a question. All in favor? I see all in favor. Motion carries. Thank you again, Chief. I will turn to item 13B, fireworks bylaw, complaints regarding fireworks. We have a report from staff dated February 14th, and I'll again turn to the Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just after Halloween November Council meeting, as a result of a few complaints from residents, Council provided staff direction to investigate and bring forward some recommendations in respect to the noise complaints resulting from the fireworks November last year. In the report are two recommendations. One basically looking at the banning of consumer fireworks, not display pyrotechnics, of banning just the consumer fireworks, and the other is a slightly more measured approach by trying to limit and to some extent police the use of consumer fireworks in our environmentally sensitive areas in an effort to strike a balance and still maintain some of the joy and some of the connectivity that we have witnessed of late, particularly from some neighborhood firework displays.
Thank you. Any questions from Councillor Garnett?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure if this is a question that the chief can answer, maybe a question maybe more to staff. The inner adjacent to, under option 2, environmentally sensitive areas, I'm trying to wrap my head around what we would envision as adjacent to. Like, is it 3 streets over, 4 streets over?
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Garnett, that's an excellent question, and the option basically requests that it go back to staff for an investigation and an additional report and findings, and those would largely be looked at by Ms. Clary and Mr. DeMare would look at those and come up with what would be appropriate in respect to that.
Thank you.
Sorry, turn to Councillor Duncan, then to Councillor Rintoul, and then I have a question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I see the the financial implications for option 2 is to fund 2 bylaw enforcement officers, but I'm wondering if there's maybe additional things that we can do in terms of kind of maybe public information getting out, just so people are aware of the ESA and that they're adjacent to it, so they're not surprised by their applications being denied if they do end up in that area, or rethink about, you know, which friend's house should host the fireworks. If we can have signs that maybe go up near beach accesses or something before Halloween, just like a, you know, FYI, this is a bird sanctuary. Fireworks just for birds, something. If there's other municipalities that might, if they have an example like that, this might be more of a question for our manager, but something to just kind of inform people in the area about the noise expectations on that night, and they can voluntarily move if they know.
No, these are excellent questions, and through the mayor to Councillor Duncan, yeah, both options, you know, would rely heavily on what I call a robust communication strategy, and that would involve the PNR, town talk, all forms of social media, and the like. And I have been in contact with our communications specialists as well about how we potentially would do that. So that's integral into whether it's a ban or kind of more a limited geographical approach. Both of we would rely heavily on that for either option.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul, then myself, and then Councillor Fallot.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks, Chief, and to staff for, I think, quite expeditiously bringing forward, you know, this report and this suggestion. I just wanted to get an understanding. I'm quite supportive of the second option that's here, and appreciative of the sense of balance that it strikes for the community. But fireworks aren't new. Halloween's not new. So has this been chronic? Have we been inundated or sporadically receive similar concerns of this nature? I just want to ensure that indeed we're comfortable moving forward with what's suggested here on the basis of the experience this year, ensuring that it's not an anomaly. Chief.
Thank you, and through the mayor to Councillor Rintoul, those are very valid points. I think we did note a marked increase in the number of displays, somewhat that coincided with COVID. I think I don't have the metrics per se to back that up, but anecdotally, having, you know, fired fireworks off in this town for 30 some odd years, and then, you know, policed it for, you know, another 15. I can state that it has been, I believe COVID did have an effect. I think that the sales online were much more significant, and that's a large driver of this. So that's definitely part and parcel of what's driving it, but also looking at a lot of the data. I looked at what was happening particularly on the North Shore, the 3 municipalities of North Vancouver, the District of North Vancouver, and West Vancouver are going through something similar, and a lot of their data kind of supports what, you know, it's largely a COVID-driven push that I think was made a little worse than years past. Also, I'll highlight that we've had Halloweens on Tuesday nights that have been very, very quiet, but if it coincides with a Friday or Saturday night, typically we're much busier.
Thank you, Councillor Rintoul. I'll pass, as my questions really came out through Councillor Duncan. Councillor Fallot.
No, my points have been covered off. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And so we do have a recommendation.
I'll move the recommendation that staff be directed to bring forward an updated fireworks regulation bylaw incorporating revisions detailed in option 1.
Okay, do we have a seconder? So that is the alternate option that Councillor Garnett is moving. Do we have a seconder? I don't see a seconder, Councillor Garnett, so that doesn't move forward.
Sorry, I was on mute. Second for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fowl. We haven't moved in second. I'll turn to Councillor Garnett to motivate.
Thank you, Mayor. There are quite a few reasons why I think this is the way to go. Not one of which is the Chiefs Association of Chiefs of Police and Fire Chiefs Association.
Councillor Garnett, I appreciate you making the motion and speaking to it. If you could just distinguish for the benefit of the public, I think Councillor is aware of the difference, but if you could just highlight the difference between the motion you made versus the motion that was recommended.
Sorry, option one is to, I have to find it here where it's written here, to prohibit the discharge of consumer fireworks within the town, but to not ban display of fireworks. And it speaks to, in the report, to the BC Association of Chiefs of Police and Fire Chiefs Association of BC, also wanting for promoting a province-wide ban. I've done a bit of research online, and it was interesting to find out that there's something, the fireworks contain something called percolates, which, well, I guess when they explode, people just assume they're gone, but they're not. And there's bits that come back to the surface that actually contaminate soil and water. And also, traditional fireworks are wrapped tightly with metals like copper and lithium, which when they explode, we can release into the air carcinogens, which are toxic to both humans and animals. The explosive sounds are panic-inducing sounds to wildlife and pets, and I can speak to first-hand knowledge of the devastating effects to a pet for over a decade. And I've had similar conversations with my neighbors and many residents in Sidney who experienced the same thing with their pets being absolutely traumatized. And it does happen to the wildlife as well, and such to the point where they will abandon their nests and their young. Pets also, if they're outside when they go off, when the fireworks go off, escape yards, get lost, and in some cases are hit by cars and killed. This is actually a regular occurrence during Halloween and Canada Day. We can't also limit how this affects people in our community in terms of mental health who are dealing with anxiety. And it's the nature of the fact that they go off at times they're unpredictable, and how that can impact somebody mentally and stress levels that go through the roof. And my research also indicates that this can be a trigger with people who have PTSD. And again, it comes down to the fact that it's, especially military veterans, it sounds that you're unprepared for. You know they're going to go off at some time, you just don't know when. And so there's a lot of negative impacts with fireworks. And it's not just I understand the community sense of people getting together, but there are people in our community who suffer when these things go off, and they need to be mentioned and thought about in this discussion. And further to that, I was thinking last year, especially around Canada Day, and how we're having longer and longer periods of drought with less and less rain, and the fire risk that these pose. It's one thing when you have professionals putting them off, or pyrotechnic experts. It's another thing when you have just any old person setting them off and not using the proper protocols and protections and safety measures. It's very easy for a fire to start with the dry conditions we're having every summer. And that is a very serious concern around the Canada Day aspect of it. And for those reasons alone, I think, and many that are there, I would love to see these be banned. And quite frankly, many municipalities are moving this direction already. And it does speak in the report to North Saanich and Central Saanich having different regulations. But you know what? We can be a leader. We can show people that there are negative impacts to these. People don't seem to recognize that, but they are. And they're quite severe and quite traumatic for individuals and animals alike. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. I'll turn to the seconder, Councillor
Thank you. I'll support Councillor Garnett's comments, and will underscore that I think also from an environmental perspective, we're looking at reducing wood burning fires and things like that because of what it's spewing into the atmosphere. And I think the number and the quantity is perhaps that much less in fireworks, but I think it's part of the direction we want to go. And it's like helium balloons. It's just part of that whole general. So I have no problem supporting it. A question through you to staff. It's noted in option 2 that there is a financial implication of about $750 for bylaw officers. And would that also apply to option 1?
Through the mayor, the Councillor Fallett, yes, I would assume that we would have to provide that on for either option. It was more specific, however, to option 2 because basically it was targets kind of one bylaw individual in and around the Ray Creek area, and then one in around the Roberts Bay Bird Sanctuary for 4 hours at a certain rate, at time and a half for a few hours. So with a little bit of additional kind of a percentage put on there to cover any overages. So that's how we arrived at that sum. Again, no matter whether there's a certain amount or areas that are permitted or not, we need to be cognizant that the vast and probably well and exceeding the 90th percentile of fireworks that are discharged that result in complaints are non-permitted. So from a bylaw perspective, they are the ones that are generating the noise complaints. The environmental and all the other items that have been raised are completely valid. But again, as long as they're available on the internet, and police and fire are not always going to be able to proactively, chase these things down, there's going to have to be a mechanism to stop and enforce them, whether it's partially permitted or banned.
Thank you for that, Chief. So I will support this motion, and I think it is the right thing for Sidney to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fallett. I'll turn to others for discussion. Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I certainly appreciate the comments Councillor Garnett has made with respect to the rationale for the motion that he's put forward. I appreciate that, and certainly not going to dispute any of the statements he's made. I think my preference remains to see us looked at. I think what I would agree in the report is sort of striking a reasonable balance in option 2, in part because it does include the suggestion around funding bylaw officers to help enforce the permitting expectations. And so I think probably bringing option 2 and that report forward serves as an opportunity as well for more detailed consultation. We're going to get feedback from residents as a result of that report, and it could very well be that based on that feedback from the community that we decide no, there is enough concern, enough angst in the community that we need to take a more strenuous position on this, similar to option 1 as suggested. But for the time being, I continue to support option 2 in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Wainwright and to Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Mayor. So I appreciate the points that Councillor Garnett brought forward in making the motion. I guess I don't really have any difficulty in it coming forward. I do anticipate that we're going to hear a lot from the community about whether it's a reasonable thing to do or not. I think option 2, where it's focusing on our environmentally sensitive areas, is a reasonable thing to do, despite that we're likely to get some objections from some residents who live in that area. But I think that one is a measured response. We could go ahead with that one, and I don't think there would be significant controversy. For option number 1, I think we have to be quite open to listening to what the community says. I agree that there is a rationale for banning the consumer ones, but nonetheless, I'm not sure that the majority of our residents are actually in favor of that.
Thank you, Councillor. I believe the next Councillor to speak, Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. I will also vote against this motion, as I believe option 2 is a reasonable compromise. And I won't rehash Councillor Rintoul or Councillor Wainwright's points, except to speak to, I know that other municipalities have banned these partly on the justification of the environmental effects regarding the pollution from the metals and things. And I think people really need to remember that the proportion and perspective of the actual volume of pollutants that are going out in these. I used to do soil monitoring for mine sites, which operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for many years at a time. And it actually takes a sustained amount of continual, constant dusting with something with metals in it in order to actually move the amount in the soil or on vegetation upwards. So one, because there's a profile of soil and it's just tiny particles on the top. In this case, the solution to the pollution is dilution. And so having a small amount of small particles in very localized areas that are distributed over maybe a couple of hours on one day a year are simply not a pollution problem we need to be concerned with, especially considering the pollutions that literally belching out of our cars and coming off them and coming off the tires at all possible times out of our own industry, off of people's homes, the paint that runs into the soil. It's simply not comparable, and it's not something that should be used to kind of justify measures that move us away from a compromise like this. So that would be the only part of my expertise I can speak to regarding the environmental issues.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe and then speak for a first time.
Thank you, Mayor. I won't support this motion at this time. Lots of good points made. I think the key thing for me is balance. There's a lot of good points brought up by Councillor Garnett, and then I have to weigh that against, families getting together maybe 3 times a year. New Year's Eve, we get a few fireworks in my neighborhood, Halloween, and Canada Day. So getting to Councillor Duncan's point about pollution and that sort of thing, I don't know that it's significant enough to warrant not allowing people to do fireworks for 3 times a year. I also had a dog. He didn't like fireworks. I kept him in, it was a few times a year. So balancing all those things I think is important. And also the reason that I recall that this came to us in the first place was the concern about the impact the fireworks was having on environmentally sensitive areas. That was the reason that I recall that this was brought forward. And I think the proposal number 2 allows staff to better target that, to be able to focus in on those areas rather than having to police the whole area. Not to say that I wouldn't support this in the future. I think, as colleagues have said, we might hear some feedback from the community on this. But for now, I think option 2 for me is the better compromise at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. There is a question with my comment, and that is, again, colleagues have spoken to how this came forward to us in terms of complaints of fireworks in environmentally sensitive areas. I think the report helpfully distinguishes between those issues and the 4 to 6 permits that are approved annually. And a question I have through to the chief is, in those 4 to 6 permits that are issued annually, do we ever have complaints, or to staff in general, do we ever have complaints associated with those particular permits from residents adjacent to where those are occurring?
To the mayor and the rest of the council, the answer would be no, not based on my recent recollection. It's very much shifted towards a neighborhood or cul-de-sac driven type of event, which is honestly was actually positive to see, especially in the context of COVID. It seems that these neighbors collectively get together. They all probably put in approximately $50 and they buy a $750 or $1,000 bundle, and then they all kind of gather. So the whole local little area or end of that street or something is all involved and engaged. And I think that's a large driver of why there's I can't recollect any of a permitted display resulting in complaints, largely because it's everyone in the neighborhood's well aware or is participating. And I would just clarify that the bylaw for consumer fireworks in the town of Sidney is only permissible for Halloween. So if there are consumer fireworks discharges on Canada Day or New Year's, those are not permitted. And obviously, again, the very busy days, those are circumstances where we would speak with those individuals. And you know, we don't go out and we're not looking to find people. We usually just say, hey, are you aware that this is a permit required or this is not permitted in the town of Sidney? And I've yet to ever have an issue where people just haven't said, apologies, I wasn't aware, and that's the end of it.
Thank you. So in seeing how this came forward to us with regards to the unpermitted fireworks being discharged in environmentally sensitive areas, firstly I want to acknowledge Councillor Garnett's points. There has been some comments from Council with regards to the points that he made with regards to pollution. However, he also spoke to points with regards to mental health and to pets and wildlife. But if there is a recommendation in terms of a strategy to deal with the unpermitted fireworks in environmentally sensitive areas. If we had had some, through this process, if we had had some feedback from residents from permitted fireworks or concerns, from people that have experienced mental health issues or pet issues and that sort of thing, I think we might, be considering this further. But I in light of what we've received as feedback from the community and how staff have addressed this and distinguishing between the unpermitted environmentally sensitive fireworks, I would support the second option. I'll turn to second-time speakers. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify, I have received multiple comments from local residents. They don't all phone into town or write emails or complain, but they know I'm a councillor, so I hear about it because of my job, quite frankly, and neighbors. So I feel it's been over the course of many years, but there are a lot of people that would support the option we're going forward with. I'm sure there's some in the other camp as well, but just to be clear that there has been, I have heard firsthand that people are not happy with it. So just want to pass that on to colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Turn to any second-time speakers. And so I'll call the question on the motion on the floor. All in favor? Opposed? We have Councillor Wainwright opposed, Councillor Rantoul opposed, Councillor Duncan opposed, Councillor O'Keefe opposed, and the Mayor opposed. The motion is defeated.
I'll move the recommendation the staff be directed to bring forward an updated fireworks regulation bylaw incorporating revisions detailed in option 2.
Second.
We have it moved and seconded. Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? We have Councillor Garnett and Councillor Fallot opposed, and the motion carries. Thank you for the discussion, Councillor, and thank you, Chief. We will turn to item 13C, which is a letter from Peninsula Celebration Society regarding the events they plan to host in 2022. And I don't know, I might turn to Mr. Humble if he has a brief introduction, or if we could just go to the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, the report pretty much speaks for itself. It outlines a number of events that take place throughout the year, including Sidney Days events, Summer Sounds concert series, Treat Street, and in the fall, Sidney Sparkles Christmas Parade, and the Polar Bear Swim. Thank you.
Thank you. So we do have a recommendation. Councillor O'Keefe?
I'll move the recommendation that the above road closures be approved subject to the following conditions. That PCS obtain approval from the RCMP to ensure traffic control is approved and in place to their satisfaction. Number 2, that PCS obtain approval and a parks use permit for the use of municipal parks for all Sidney Days events, Summer Sounds events, and the Sidney Sparkles Christmas Parade. 3, that PCS conform to all town bylaws. 4, that the PCS make all events that require the closure of Beacon Avenue to traffic, smoke, and vape free. That PCS arrange a meeting with town staff, the RCMP, and the Sidney Fire Department to review safety requirements at least 4 weeks prior to each event. That PCS send out notices at least 2 weeks prior to each event to affected residents and businesses, advising of the events, and provide a contact number should there be any concerns or questions. 7, that the PCS work with the town to provide and maintain temporary toilet facilities for each event, the number and location of these facilities to be approved by the town. And 8, that PCS follow the latest provincial health officer guidelines and recommendations while planning and hosting each event.
Thank you for reading those in. Councillor O'Keefe, do we have a seconder?
Second.
Moved by Councillor Fallett. Councillor O'Keefe?
No, just happy to see that maybe we're going to return to normal. So that's great in terms of events.
Thank you. Councillor Fallett?
Nope, good.
Thank you. No, I was thrilled, as I'm sure we all are, to see this come forward, and I know the community is, we all engage with our circles in the community, and after 2 years, we can't wait for these types of events to return to our community. And so my hat's off to the celebrations for moving to plan these events. I'll call the question. All in favor? I see all members in favor. The motion carries. Thank you. And we'll turn to item 13D, which is a letter from the organizer of the 2022 Bazan Bay 5-kilometer road race. And we have a recommendation.
I'll move the recommendation that Team West Coast Triathlon Club, the club, be granted permission to close roads as per approved traffic plan between the hours of 11 a.m. to 12 noon on Sunday, April 10th, 2022, for the purpose of hosting the 2022 Synergy Health Management Limited Bazan Bay 5-kilometer road race in Sidney, subject to the following conditions. 1, that the club provides the town with proof of $5 million minimum liability insurance, indemnifying the town of Sidney of any liability. 2, that the club receives written permission from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to use the routes within the ministry's jurisdiction and provides a copy of the approval to the town. 3, that the club notifies all residents and businesses situated along the race route 2 weeks in advance and provides a copy of the notification and confirmation of delivery 1 week prior to the event to the town. 4, that the club notifies BC Transit, the Sidney Fire Department, and the ambulance service of the event, and the club complies with any requirements they may have. 5, that the club receives written permission from the RCMP, including approval of the traffic management plan, a copy of approval to be submitted to the town, and the club pays any fees, costs levied by the RCMP. 6, that no costs are to be incurred either directly or indirectly by the town for this event. 7, that the club work with the town to provide and maintain temporary toilet facilities for the event, the number and locations of these facilities to be approved by the town. And 8, the event follow the latest provincial health officer guidelines and recommendations around mass gatherings and events.
Thank you, Councillor, for reading those in. Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Rintoul. Any discussion? My comments are ditto to the previous events that were coming forward. I'll call the question. All in favor? I see all in favor. The motion carries. Thank you. And we'll now turn to correspondence under Section 14, and the first is 14A, which is a letter from the San Juan County, Washington State, and Islands Trust in the Gulf Islands, dated January 26th, and there is regarding emergency towing vessel in Sidney, and we have a recommendation.
We received for information.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Councillor O'Keefe. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? I see all members in favor. The motion carries. Thank you. And we'll turn to item 14B, which is the Sidney Event Advisory Group, also known as SEAG, their 2021 annual report, dated January 21st.
Move receipt for information.
Moved by Councillor O'Keefe.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Duncan. Any discussion? Seeing none, I just want to thank SEAG for the report and all of the organizations continuing to work together on events for our community. I'll call a question. All in favor? I see all in favor. The motion carries. And we'll turn to item 14C, which is a letter from Central Saanich, a referral for comment on their OCP bylaw, a letter dated February 3rd. And we have a recommendation.
Report to staff for report, or excuse me, report to staff for a response.
Second.
Moved by Councillor O'Toole, second by Councillor O'Keefe. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? I see all in favor. The motion carries. Thank you. And we have items to receive under correspondence for information.
Move receipt.
Moved by Councillor Wainwright, seconded by Councillor O'Toole. All in favor? I see all in favor. Motion carries. Thank you. And we will turn, we have no notices of motion this evening. I'll turn to a motion to go in camera. Councillor Garnett.
I'll move the recommendation that is in the opinion of council that the public interest requires that persons other than members of the council and officers be excluded from the meeting to consider confidential matters respecting an individual be considered for an appointment and labor relations and other personnel issues pursuant to section 90.1 A and C of the community charter, and that council continue the meeting in closed session.
We have it moved by Councillor Garnett,
Second.
seconded by Councillor O'Keefe. All in favor? All in favor. The motion carries. Thank you. And a motion to adjourn.
Come
I hear it moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. We'll recess for 5 minutes before going in camera. Thank you.